A strict teacher accused a quiet 12-year-old boy of cheating on his math test until he solved every problem in front of everyone, his answers shocking the entire school. Keon Reddick didn't talk much, and he never had to. He wasn't the type of kid who needed attention to prove his worth. His actions spoke for him, and most of the time they were louder than any noise in the classroom. At 12, he was tall for his age, slim, always wearing a navy blue hoodie with his initials stitched on the sleeve by his grandma. While the other 6th graders at McKinley Middle School in Toledo, Ohio, were still struggling with long division, Keon was doodling algebraic equations in his notebook, just for fun. His classmates noticed, even if they didn't always get it. "Yo, Keon, you finished the quiz already?" one boy whispered during 3rd period. Keon gave a small nod, eyes still on his paper. "How?" He just shrugged. "I like numbers." Every teacher he'd had since 3rd grade quietly knew he was different, but not in a bad way. He was helpful, focused, respectful, the kind of student teachers usually loved, except for Mrs. Judith Penmar. She taught math with sharp words, tight schedules, and cold eyes. She'd been at McKinley for nearly 20 years, known for her strict rules. To her, gifted wasn't real unless the school district officially labeled it. And in her eyes, Keon wasn't labeled, just suspiciously advanced. Whenever Keon raised his hand, she either ignored him or called on someone else. If he answered without being asked, she'd say, "Let's hear from someone else this time." No smile, no warmth. Still, Keon never complained. He stayed after class to help classmates who didn't understand, breaking down math problems with a patience that seemed beyond his years. One afternoon, he was helping Juliana Rivera with fractions while Mrs. Penmar sat at her desk. "Okay," Keon said softly, pointing at Juliana's worksheet. "You just flip the second number and multiply like this." "Oh, exactly?" Juliana asked, nervous. "Yeah, you got it?" Mrs. Penmar glanced up, then back at her computer, her face unreadable. The next day, Keon turned in a homework assignment filled with word problems so tough even some teachers might have double-checked their answers. He'd used a shortcut he learned from a YouTube video on mental math, something he'd practiced until it was second nature. Mrs. Penmar marked the paper, paused halfway through, and held it up. "Keon," she called across the room. "Did you do this yourself?" He looked confused. "Yes." She pressed her lips together. "Where did you learn this method?" "I watched a video, then tried it a few times at home." She stared at him, and something in her expression shifted. Doubt, discomfort, maybe even annoyance. After class, she didn't say a word to him, but Keon wasn't focused on her. That night, he went home, put on his headphones, and scribbled numbers in his workbook like always. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He just loved how math made sense, how every problem had an answer, even when people didn't. The other teachers at McKinley, his English teacher, his science teacher, even the janitor smiled when he passed in the hall. He wasn't loud or flashy, but his quiet confidence left an impression. Still, math was his world, and unfortunately, that meant he was stuck in Mrs. Penmar's class. The school year went on. Keon kept scoring high, but every time he aced a test, Mrs. Penmar's face stayed blank. No praise, no recognition. Then came the day everything changed. It was the district-wide advanced math placement exam, a brutal test meant for 8th graders given to the top 6th graders in Toledo. Keon didn't just pass, he got a perfect score. 100 out of 100. While most teachers would have celebrated a rare talent, Mrs. Penmar's reaction was different. She didn't smile, she didn't say, "Well done." She stood up, test in hand, and walked straight out of the room. But what started as quiet tension was about to explode into something nobody expected. Mrs. Penmar didn't go to the break room. She didn't stop to make copies or use the bathroom like she usually did after class. She marched straight to Principal Leonard Gossette's office, clutching Keon's test like it was evidence of a crime. Leonard was halfway through a peanut butter protein bar when she barged in. He blinked, startled. "Judith, everything okay?" She shut the door slowly, firmly, like she didn't want anyone else to hear. "We need to talk about Keon Reddick." He set the bar down. "He okay?" That's exactly the question. She slid the test across his desk. He scored 100 on the advanced math exam. Leonard raised an eyebrow. "That's incredible. I didn't even know he was taking it." "He wasn't supposed to. He got in as an alternate after another kid dropped out." She crossed her arms. "But this score, it's too clean, no mistakes. Every step matches the answer key exactly." She leaned forward, her voice low. "Are you saying he cheated?" She didn't answer right away. Her eyes stayed fixed on Leonard. "I'm saying it's suspicious. The methods he used aren't even ones we've taught. It's like someone fed him the answers." Leonard studied the test again. The neat handwriting, the perfectly laid out steps, the final answers circled. "You know there was a district proctor in the room during the exam." He could have memorized it, or had access to the questions early. Leonard sighed, leaning back in his chair. "I'll send it to the district office. But Judith, this is a serious accusation. Keon's never given us a reason not to trust him." "I get that," she said tightly. "I just don't believe a kid like him could have done this alone." Silence stretched between them. Too long. Leonard tilted his head. "A kid like him?" She looked away, jaw tightening. "You know what I mean?" Back in the classroom, Keon sat quietly as students trickled out. He waited for Auntie Moira, his legal guardian, and his late mother's sister, to pick him up. She was running late again, so he pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and sketched out his own math problems just to see if he could solve them. Outside, Moira's silver Honda Civic finally pulled up, its half-peeled bumper sticker flapping in the wind. "Sorry, baby," she said as he climbed in. "Had to drop off flyers for the food drive. You good?" He nodded. She glanced at him as she drove off. "You don't talk much, huh?" A small smile. "Get that test score back today?" Another nod. 100. Moira burst out laughing. "See? Told you all that scribbling and humming wasn't for nothing." Keon grinned, the kind of smile he only gave her. She didn't always get his math, but she never doubted him. The next morning, Mrs. Penmar's tone was icy. She took attendance without looking at Keon, like he wasn't even there. During the lesson, she messed up a percentage problem on the board. Keon raised his hand. She ignored it. He waited, then slowly lowered it. At lunch, Juliana slid next to him. "Hey, did you hear what she said?" Keon glanced up. "She told Mr. Fielding you cheated." Juliana lowered her voice. "I heard her in the copy room. She said it's statistically unlikely for a student like you to score that high." Keon turned back to his tray, silent. But inside, something hot and heavy settled in his chest. Not warmth, anger, the kind he didn't know how to use yet. That afternoon, Keon was called into the counselor's office. A woman he'd never met sat across from the guidance counselor. "Keon," she said gently, "I'm Doctor Cheryl Maynard from the district's academic integrity team. We just want to ask you a few questions about last week's math test. Is that okay?" He hesitated. "Did I do something wrong?" No, she smiled. "We just want to understand how you approached the test." He looked at his hands. "I just solved the problems." "And how did you learn the methods you used?" "Sometimes I watch math videos. I pause them and try the problems myself." Dr. Maynard exchanged a glance with the counselor. "Would you mind taking a similar test? Same difficulty, just you, me, and a timer?" Keon's jaw tensed. "Okay." But before anyone could decide what to believe, the district made a move that would change everything. The room was colder than usual, not freezing, but enough that Keon kept his hoodie sleeves pulled over his wrists. On Thursday morning, he was told to report to room 3C, normally used for teacher meetings. Inside, A long table stood in the center with 2 chairs facing each other. A thick test packet waited. So did Dr. Maynard. "Good morning, Keon," she said, voice still soft. "Sleep okay?" He nodded, gripping his backpack strap. "This test will be similar to the last one. No time limit, but I'll be observing and recording how you work." She clicked on a small audio recorder and set it between them. "That okay?" Keon hesitated, then nodded. "Good. Just do what you always do." He opened the packet. The first problem was a geometry proof. He read it silently, tapped his pencil once, then started writing. Clean diagrams, logical steps, no erasures. No second guessing. Dr. Maynard watched closely, jotting notes not about his answers, but about how he worked. Calm, methodical, the kind of thinking that didn't come from cheating, it came from knowing. Outside the door, a small crowd had gathered. Principal Gossett, the district supervisor, even Mr. Shapiro, the science teacher with his ever-present coffee mug. They stood motionless behind the hallway's glass window, watching in complete silence. Not a single word passed between them. Back in class, Mrs. Penmar was visibly tense. Her pen clicked incessantly as she distributed worksheets, her voice sharper than normal. Students exchanged glances. The empty seat in the second row, where Keon usually sat, seemed louder than the hushed whispers filling the room. "Is he in trouble?" one girl murmured. "Why would he be?" another countered. "He's the smartest kid here." Mrs. Penmar didn't respond. She just stared at the chalkboard, her back rigid. 2 hours passed in room 3C. Keon worked steadily through complex algebra problems, abstract word puzzles, and pattern recognition challenges. Dr. Maynard observed closely, particularly fascinated by how he sometimes muttered explanations under his breath. At one point, she leaned forward. "Can you walk me through this one?" Keon looked up. "Okay." He pointed at the equation. "This is just factoring, but the trick is seeing the coefficients of perfect squares, so taking square roots first saves time." Dr. Maynard blinked. "Did someone teach you that?" He shook his head. "Just noticed the pattern." "What about this series problem?" Small shrug. "Saw something similar in a library book about sequences. You read math books often." A nod, then hesitation. "Not textbooks, just ones with interesting problems to try. I like solving things." By hour 3, he'd finished. Not just completed, but produced work cleaner and more confident than his original test. Dr. Maynard stepped into the hallway to meet the waiting administrators. "I've handled hundreds of cheating cases," she said firmly. "This isn't one of them." Mr. Shapiro frowned. Could he have memorized? No. She cut him off. He understood deeply, rephrased problems, solved them multiple ways, explained his reasoning. That's not memorization, that's genuine mastery. The district supervisor asked quietly, "So what now?" "We acknowledge what he is. An exceptional thinker," Dr. Maynard said. "Then we ask why nobody noticed sooner." That afternoon, Keon emerged from room 3C, backpack slung over one shoulder, a new math book tucked under his arm, a gift from Dr. Maynard. "Thank you for your patience today," she said, walking beside him. "You're very special, Keon." He looked down, then asked softly, "Can I go back to class now?" She smiled. "Of course." But when Keon demonstrated his solutions aloud, something fundamental had changed. By next morning, whispers rippled through McKinley, not loud, but persistent. Hushed conversations in hallways, sideways glances in the cafeteria, teachers murmuring by the copier. Keon Reddick had astonished the district. Word spread that he'd not only retaken the advanced test under scrutiny, but solved problems aloud with alternative methods, faster than before. This didn't just silence doubters, it turned skepticism into awe. In the teacher's lounge, Mr. Shapiro shook his head. "We might be looking at one of those once-in-a-generation minds." Mrs. Penmar sipped black coffee, eyes fixed on her computer. "For a 6th grader," Shapiro continued, "he worked through that test like it was basic arithmetic. They say he spotted patterns even the evaluators missed." Penmar didn't respond. Miss Felton added, "What's he like in class, Judith?" "Quiet," Penmar said shortly. "Quiet but bright?" "Bright." A pause. "But the speed he works, it's not normal." Shapiro raised an eyebrow. "Maybe it's not supposed to be." Back in math class, Keon sat at his desk, chalk in hand, solving an extra credit problem Mrs. Penmar had assigned, something she rarely did. "Let's see who can solve this by Friday," she'd challenged while writing it on the board. Keon studied it briefly, then raised his hand. Penmar hesitated before nodding. He approached the board. The room fell silent as classmates exchanged curious looks. With careful strokes, he drew a number line, labelled each step, and broke the complex problem into simpler parts. 2 minutes later, he turned. "I think this is the answer." Mrs. Penmar stared, arms crossed. "Explain your method." He did, clear, patient, step by step. When he finished, she studied the board a moment longer, then gave a single nod. "Correct." A wave of quiet astonishment swept through the room. That afternoon, Principal Gosset appeared at the classroom door unexpectedly. "Sorry to interrupt," he said with a smile. "Keon, could I speak with you?" Mrs. Penmar gave a tight nod. In the hallway, Gosset leaned in. "How are you holding up?" Keon shrugged. "I wanted you to know," Gosset continued. "We're selecting a few students for special math enrichment at the district office." The administrators stood frozen behind the observation window, their breath fogging the glass as they watched. Not a single whisper disturbed the heavy silence. In the classroom, Mrs. Penmar's usual crisp movements had turned jagged. The relentless clicking of her pen punctuated each worksheet she slapped onto desks. Students fidgeted, their eyes darting to the conspicuous void where Keon should have been sitting. "Did he get suspended?" someone mouthed. Another student rolled their eyes. "For being too good at math." Mrs. Penmar's chalk snapped against the board as she wrote, her shoulders rigid with tension. In room 3C, time dissolved around Keon as he navigated the labyrinth of equations. Dr. Maynard leaned closer each time he unconsciously narrated his process, her interest growing with every murmured insight. "Show me your approach here," she invited, pointing to a complex polynomial. Keon's pencil didn't hesitate. "These terms form a perfect cube pattern." His fingers sketched invisible shapes in the air. "If you group them this way, the solution unfolds itself." "You discovered this independently?" A quiet nod. "Numbers sort of show their secrets if you watch long enough." By the third hour, his test paper resembled a masterclass, each solution more elegant than the last. Dr. Maynard faced the waiting administrators with finality. "In 15 years assessing gifted students, I've never seen such clear evidence of raw mathematical intuition." Mr. Shapiro scratched his temple. "But the probability is irrelevant when faced with proof." She tapped Keon's test. "Watch the footage. He doesn't recall answers. He converses with the problems. That's not cheating. That's genius recognizing itself." The district supervisor exhaled slowly. "What's our next step?" "First, apologize, Doctor," Maynard said firmly. "Then provide the challenges this mind deserves before we lose him to boredom." Keon emerged from the testing room, transformed doctor. Maynard's recommended textbook pressed to his chest like a shield. His steps slowed as they passed Mrs. Penmar's classroom. "You'll remember this day, Doctor," Maynard murmured. "When they doubted what you couldn't help but be." Keon's fingers tightened on the book's spine. "Can I just go to math now?" Her smile held both pride and sorrow. "Of course." But the classroom door opening revealed a new reality, one where every head turned with dawning understanding. By morning, McKinley hummed with quiet revelation. Conversation stuttered when Keon passed. Teachers' eyes followed him with new curiosity. In the faculty lounge, Mr. Shapiro stirred his coffee absently. The district's bringing in university mathematicians to evaluate him. They're calling it an academic anomaly verification. Mrs. Penmar's knuckles whitened around her mug. precocious students exist.
Not like this. Shapiro met her gaze. He derived the quadratic formula from first principles during the test. For fun. Across the table, Miss Felton leaned forward. Judith, have you considered he might be the reason you've been asked to update your lesson plans? A beat of silence. Then the sharp crack of a coffee cup meeting its saucer. The extra credit problem hung on the board like a gauntlet thrown. Keon approached it with the quiet certainty of a translator deciphering a familiar language. 30 pairs of eyes tracked his every movement as chalk met slate. The numbers unfolded under his touch, each step a revelation. When he finished, even the clock's ticking seemed to pause. Mrs. Penmar's voice came softer than anyone had ever heard it. Demonstrate your reasoning. As Keon spoke, something unexpected happened. The class leaned forward as one, not just watching, but finally seeing. Therefore, X equals 7, he concluded. The room exhaled. Mrs. Penmar studied the work, then did something unprecedented. She wrote correct beneath it, with a flourish no one could miss. Principal Gossette's appearance at the door carried new weight now. The entire class turned as one when he called for Keon. In the hallway, Gossette crouched slightly, bringing himself eye level. The district wants to offer you something special, he began, unfolding a brochure. There's a Saturday program at Toledo University. Keon's eyes flickered to the page, then back up. Will I miss basketball? Gossette's laugh rang through the hall. We'll make sure you don't. He hesitated, then added quietly, for what it's worth. I'm sorry we didn't see you sooner. Keon simply nodded, but the set of his shoulders relaxed just slightly. Somewhere behind them, a classroom door stood open, waiting. The administrators stood like statues behind the observation glass, their collective breath fogging the pane. The silence between them grew heavier with each passing minute. In the classroom, Mrs. Penmar's usually precise movements had turned sharp and erratic. The constant click-click of her pen marked time as she distributed worksheets with unnecessary force. Students exchanged nervous glances, their attention repeatedly drawn to the empty desk in the second row, a silent accusation in itself. Think he got expelled? Came a hushed voice. Another student scoffed. For acing a test, please. The sharp crack of Mrs. Penmar's chalk breaking punctuated the whispered exchange. In the sterile quiet of room 3C, Keon moved through the mathematical challenges with the quiet focus of a composer hearing a symphony no one else could. Dr. Maynard found herself leaning closer each time he unconsciously verbalized his thought process, her professional curiosity piqued by each murmured insight. Walk me through this one, she prompted, indicating a particularly complex equation. Keon's pencil moved without hesitation. The coefficients here form a perfect cube relationship. His fingers traced invisible patterns in the air. When you see that structure, the solution reveals itself. And you recognized this pattern on your own? A small, almost shy nod. Numbers. They sort of talk to you if you listen. By the third hour, his test paper had become something extraordinary, each solution more elegant and efficient than the last. Dr. Maynard faced the waiting administrators with the quiet authority of someone who had seen enough. In my professional assessment, she began, this isn't merely a gifted student, this is mathematical intuition of the highest order. Mr. Shapiro rubbed his temple. But statistics don't account for genius, she interrupted, tapping Keon's test. Review the footage. He's not recalling answers. He's engaging in dialogue with the mathematics itself. The district supervisor exhaled slowly. What do you recommend? First, an apology, Dr. Maynard stated firmly. Then the academic challenges this mind requires before we lose him to disengagement. Keon emerged from the testing room changed in subtle ways, Dr. Maynard's gifted textbook hugged to his chest like armor. As they passed Mrs. Penmar's classroom, his steps slowed almost imperceptibly. You'll remember today, Doctor,
Maynard said softly. The day they questioned what you simply are. Keon's grip tightened on the book. Can I just go back to class now? Her smile held both triumph and sadness. Of course. But the classroom door revealed a new reality, 30 heads turning in unison, seeing him properly for the first time. By morning, the school buzzed with quiet revelation. Conversations paused when Keon passed. Teachers' glances lingered with new understanding. In the faculty lounge, Mr. Shapiro absently stirred his coffee. The district's bringing in professors from Toledo University. They're calling it a cognitive exceptionality assessment. Mrs. Penmar's grip turned her knuckles white. Bright students aren't that uncommon. Not like this? Shapiro met her gaze. He derived Euler's identity from first principles during the test, as a mental exercise. Across the table, Miss Felton leaned in. Judith? Could he be why the district's reviewing our advanced math curriculum? The sharp clink of a coffee cup meeting saucer was the only reply. The extra credit problem loomed on the board like a challenge to destiny itself. Keon approached with the quiet assurance of someone reading a familiar story. Every eye followed as chalk met blackboard. Numbers and symbols flowed from his hand like a secret language being translated. When he finished, even the rustle of notebooks ceased. Mrs. Penmar's voice, when it came, held a new quality. Explain your process. As Keon spoke, something remarkable happened. The class leaned forward as one, not just hearing, but truly comprehending. Therefore, the solution is x equals 7, he concluded. The collective exhale was audible. Mrs. Penmar studied the work, then did something unprecedented. She wrote correct beneath it, with a flourish that drew gasps. Principal Gosset's appearance at the door carried new significance. The entire class turned as one when he called for Keon. In the hallway, Gosset knelt to eye level. The district has an opportunity for you, he said, unfolding a brochure. There's an advanced studies program at Toledo University. Keon's eyes flicked to the brochure, then back up. Will it interfere with basketball? Gosset's laughter echoed down the hall. We'll make it work. He hesitated, then added quietly, And Keon, I'm sorry we didn't recognize you sooner. A barely perceptible nod, but the tension in Keon's shoulders eased slightly. Behind them, the classroom door remained open, an invitation to return, but to what exactly remained to be seen. Frosted breath patterns bloomed and faded on the observation window as 4 administrators stood motionless. The only sound was the nervous tapping of the district supervisor's pen against his clipboard. In classroom 214, Mrs. Penmar's normally precise handwriting slanted aggressively across the board. Her red pen hovered over the attendance sheet, leaving an inkblot beside Keon's empty seat. The rhythmic clicking of her ballpoint punctuated the whispers, rippling through the room. Think they suspended him? Jamal mouthed to Lila. She rolled her eyes. For being too good at fractions? Doubt it? The sudden snap of Mrs. Penmar's ruler against her desk silenced the class. A fine cloud of chalk dust settled around her feet. Room 3. C smelled of industrial cleaner and sharpened pencils. Keon worked in perfect stillness, his graphite moving in smooth arcs across the paper. Dr. Maynard adjusted her glasses, leaning closer as he muttered equations under his breath like incantations. Explain your approach to number 7, she requested, indicating a multivariable calculus problem. Keon's pencil didn't hesitate. The partial derivatives form harmonic conjugates here. His finger traced invisible contours in the air. If you treat them as Cauchy-Riemann conditions, the solution emerges naturally. You derived this from first principles? A barely perceptible nod. The numbers, they arrange themselves if you don't force them. 3 hours later, his test resembled a mathematical art exhibit, each proof more elegant than the last, margins filled with exploratory corollaries. Dr. Maynard faced the administrators with her arms crossed, Keon's test papers fanned out like a poker hand. This isn't merely gifted, she stated. This is savant-level number sense coupled with extraordinary working memory. Mr. Shapiro rubbed his temples. But the statistical unlikelihood means nothing, she interrupted. Watch the footage. He's not recalling, he's discovering in real time. Notice how he checks his work using alternative methods. That's authentic mastery. The superintendent exhaled sharply. Recommendations? Immediate acceleration, Dr. Maynard said, and professional development for his teachers before we lose this mind to disengagement. Keon emerged holding a worn copy of Concrete Mathematics against his chest like armor. As they passed Mrs. Penmar's room, his footsteps faltered for half a second. "You'll remember today, Doctor," Maynard murmured, when they mistook brilliance for deception. Keon's fingers flexed around the book spine. "Can I just go to math now?" Her smile held both victory and sorrow. "Of course." The door swung open to reveal 30 students mid-lesson, their heads snapping up in unison. By second period, the school vibrated with quiet energy. Conversation stuttered when Keon turned corners. Teachers' eyes tracked him with dawning comprehension. In the faculty lounge, Mr. Shapiro stirred sugar into his coffee with unnecessary vigor. "The university's sending their number theory professor. They want to run fMRI studies during problem solving." Mrs. Penmar's mug hit the table with excessive force. "Precocious children exist. Not like this." Shapiro met her gaze. He solved the Riemann hypothesis for a special case during the exam as a warm-up. Miss Felton leaned forward. "Judith, is that why Central Office requested all your lesson plans?" The subsequent silence was broken only by the drip of coffee from the cracked mug. The Putnam-level problem on the board might as well have been written in hieroglyphs to the class. Keon approached with the quiet confidence of a native speaker. Every student leaned forward as his chalk danced across the slate. Complex variables resolved into elegant solutions beneath his fingers. When he finished, even the clock's ticking seemed muted. Mrs. Penmar's voice, when it came, carried unfamiliar warmth. "Explain your reasoning." As Keon spoke, something miraculous happened. Comprehension dawned across the room like sunrise. "Thus the solution converges to 7, he concluded. The collective inhale was audible. Mrs. Penmar studied the work, then wrote QED beside it in perfect script. Principal Gosset's arrival carried new gravity. The entire class pivoted when he cleared his throat. In the hallway, Gosset crouched to eye level. "The governor's school has a residential program," he said, unfolding a brochure. "Full scholarship." Keon's eyes flicked to the pamphlet. "Will there be time for robotics club?" Gosset's chuckle echoed off the lockers. "We'll make it work." He hesitated. "Keon, we failed you first, but we won't again." A microscopic nod, but the tension in Keon's jaw eased slightly. Behind them, the classroom door stood ajar, the faint scent of chalk and possibility drifting through.